All right, you guys. So we're going to talk about foster care accounting today. And there's several different steps. I've actually labeled out like 10 different steps that we're going to go through. And we're going to start pretty simple with things that you may be familiar with, is really setting up the proper records on a child in order to do this accounting. So very first thing is I'm going to find the test record that we're playing with and access that child's cover page. So first thing that the child needs is a placement record. And this is, again, this is a foster care placement, not an adoption placement. This really only deals with foster care. So it's just not going to have anything to do with an adoption record or at all. It is a foster care placement specifically. So placements and adoptions was on the cover page sidebar. And then I'm going to click and add a foster care placement record. I'm going to set my location. And I'm going to really focus this on foster family placements rather than a residential treatment setting where a child may be placed at an organization or a home, and you might label that as an organization record rather than a foster family record. Okay, so this is really specific to foster family placements. I'm going to add the placement start date. This is a little bit older version, so that date, that calendar look right there is has been resolved, but this site doesn't show that. So I'm going to start us back in January 1, 2025. I'm going to set a placing authority. This is the county or the state that is making payments for this child's care. Right? And then I am going to set the placement type, which again, we're going to focus on foster homes. This placement type field has a list behind it that connects the values here to the specific type of care payment, which we'll get to in the future. For the most part, these are always, whether it's foster home, residential, or intensive care, tend to be connected to the foster care type, foster care type in the back end. So for the most part, you'll just add new descriptors here for that. And then we'll just say this is an active placement and we'll press save. So now we have a placement record that just says where that child's located, the date that it started, the length of time, and the placing authority that's responsible for making these payments. Now I'm going to go back to the child's cover page. And the second thing that's required for rate history is the second thing that is required for foster care accounting is a rate history record. So rate history records and care payments are under the child accounting details link in the sidebar. And once I'm on this screen, our master site is set up with some pretty basic information about the child, the current placement, which we just added, and then the some summarizations of care payments that will start to be calculated as we move forward. So we've got bill net amount and payment net amount with $3 on this. I think that's just old data that I didn't clean out. Essentially, if you've got a new child, you won't have anything in here at this point. Or even if it's not a new child record into your system and you've not done care payments before, you shouldn't have any data in. So our next step is to build a rate history record. So rate history records are the timeline of rate changes for a child or for this specific child. So let me add, because I think it might be a little clearer when I click in here. You've got very specific things that you need to tell Sam about this child's rate. These are your contracted rates that are coming from the placing authority, right? So either your state or county that's designating the rates. My understanding is you are provided with when does this rate start? A level of care. Generally, this seems to vary by state, where there's some general category or characteristic that they label children in this sort of needs as is either they're like in a basic or they have some sort of therapeutic. They might be in independent living and have a different rate. Your county may vary on age, or your placing authority may vary on age, level of care, and even your rates may vary if you are paid by counties as far as what each county in your state pays for different rates. So that is given to you with your contracted rates. And then Sam is also broken into daily rates or monthly rates. You won't use both. You'll use one or the other. For this rate history record. So there are some clients that we work with that work across many states. And they, like, as an example, they work in California, which is on a monthly rate, but then they work in another state that's a daily rate. You cannot have both. Sam would not know what to calculate. So on this rate history record for this child, you can only have daily or monthly. Some folks on the call, our clients that we work with, will just have daily or just have monthly rates. And if that's the case for you, because you're not across different states that vary in the way that they pay, we can actually customize the form to remove monthly or remove daily. Okay. Our rate start date must start at the same, it may either come before or be the exact same start date as your initial placement record. So this placement that I created for this child starts on January 1st. And we'll just say that this rate is open, right? Maybe we don't have a closure for the rate. Maybe we already know our contracted rates, and maybe for this year, it's always 12/31/2025. I don't know, because that varies, you know, again, on your contracted rates with your placing authority. But you can choose to end a date, or we can leave it all empty. And I'm going to leave it empty because I want to show a couple variations of this. And so I'm going to leave it empty for now. I'm going to put the child in a basic level of care, and then I am going to add daily rates, which is really going to be my focus. Today is I'm really going to stay on daily rates, but monthly rates we would put in, you know, it's now $1,000 or whatever it is for that month. And then I will press save. Sam will take us back to the child accounting details screen, where again, we can see our current placement and we can see our rate history record. So below this screen, below the rate history are all the areas where our care payments can be created or will be created once we run what's called the Care Payments Hub. And these care payments are broken into foster home, which are the payments that are going directly to the foster home provider. Administration payments, which is your agency's portion of this payment. It will show respite payments if if this child went into respite during their placement. And then additional payments is for other things like clothing allowances. Maybe you are paying for sports. I know that was mentioned for somebody on the call. Maybe you do some additional, this child has an additional medical payment that's but you really want to keep that child in that placement for the foster at that foster home and they need some support. So this additional payments can really vary depending on what types of payments you might help as an organization pay for this child so the child remains in care. And I'll try and show if we get there like a clothing allowance, but that could get fairly complicated quickly as well. There's something that's already kind of complicated in nature. So Sam is going to create these care payments when we run the Care Payments Hub. There are two ways to access Care Payments Hub. When you're on this child accounting details screen, right, Care Payments Hub is accessible here. It's also accessible if I click on settings and go to Care Payments Hub down here. It's going to take me to the exact same spot. This is a spot where you run the Care Payments Hub. There are some settings I'm not going to talk about today because I want to do first a conversation of how you would do this all manually. So there are some additional settings for adding rates automatically out of the system. And then there is a report menu here, which the intent was for it to be accounting, foster care accounting related reports. I don't believe there's really any limits to what reports you can put on here. And we'll talk to reporting maybe a little bit later. I really don't even have that on my agenda, but that's part of this for sure. So what I'm going to do right now, I'm just jumping back to that child accounting details screen, is I'm going to create a couple of care payments based off the information we've told Sam today, which is, again, pulling from the current placement record, and it's pulling from the rate history. So I'm going to jump back over. It takes a few minutes for it to run. So here I can kind of talk to that. These care payment records that Sam is going to create are based on the rate history record that we set. So $50 a day for foster home admin and respite payments, multiplied by the days a child was in care for the previous month or however far back this Care Payments Hub is running, right? So let's see, this child is there. So I'm going to refresh the screen, and now we have care payments. So I've done a very simple example to start with, which is in January, child was in care 31 days from January 1st to January 31st at a rate of $50 a day. And this is what that total is. Let me step back one tick. I clicked run for the last 3 months. And so last month, it's now March, last month was February, and it went back to January as well. I ran that specifically so that we could go all the way back to the beginning of time for this child's placement. I do think most folks run for the last 3 months because retroactive payments are a thing for people who manage foster care, where a county or a placing authority changes a child's level of care mid-month. Why else would you run back that far? And also the other reason, maybe the data entry isn't done on time all the time. It's just the nature of we're humans, and it just doesn't always get done. So you may have your actual tracking of data may come behind. That's okay. And so it's going back 3 months in time. Trying to think if there's anything else. We'll go back to that because I do want to hit some other important parts. So that's running the Care Payments Hub, and these are the results that you see. It's just you get new records that allow you to see how much you're paying to the foster parent or to your organization. Oh gosh, that's where it was. This child has, I did not fully clean up my records. And that's what's going on here, is why we have a respite payment. That's okay. We'll let that be for now. So the next thing that I want to talk about is a retroactive payment. And that would be where the placing authority has actually changed the rate a month or two later, but it's going back to January 1, let's say. So that would look like, I'm just going to change one that actually maybe the kid's level of care changed. And I can literally just go and update this record. So it's still going to go all the way back to January 1. But that's not automatically reflected here. Nothing changes until we run Care Payments Hub again. Okay. But once I change and rerun Care Payments Hub, the rates for both January and February are going to go up for the foster home payment here. They're going to go up to $60 times 31 or 28 days, where this administration payment is not going to be affected at all because that rate stayed the same. So let me refresh this screen. And now we have different rates here, right? So, because otherwise it would match this rate exactly. And we have a higher rate because we've added $10 more a day for this youth's care. Okay, other situations that happen are mid-month rate changes. So when you have a mid-month rate change, you're actually going to create a new rate history record. So we'll click add, and I'm going to set this from January 15th to an open end date. And I'll leave that open. Let's say that it's now intensive care and the admin rate is $100 for all of these, for admin, foster home, and respite payment. And I'll press save. So now we literally have a secondary record, but we have to clean up our prior record. Otherwise, Sam is not going to know when to stop calculating. And I'm not actually sure what it does right here. Is will it duplicate everything or will it do nothing? I kind of think it does nothing because it doesn't know what to do. So I have to end this prior rate on 114. Right? So this rate ends 114 and this rate begins on 115. And so when you're dealing with rate history, this memo does give you the information, but I want to just be sure that I'm clear with it, is there can be no gaps in the time and no overlaps. So as an example, if I had this as 116, which I won't really do because it's not going to help us, Sam is not going to know what to do because it doesn't know how to handle the 15th, right? January 15th, it doesn't have information for it, so it's not going to compute. So I'm going to leave this. So it's got to be consecutive, the 14th to the 15th, and you cannot have overlaps. So if this were 115 and the next rate start date starts on 115, Sam is also not going to know, do I do $60 for a foster home payment or do I do $100? It doesn't know, and so it's not going to transact the way that you want. So no gaps, no overlaps when you have rate changes. So I'm specifically making it a mid-month rate change, but oftentimes for kids in long-term care might be in care for such an extended period of time that the rate changes, but it's not changing mid-month. And that is fine. You're going to build these rate history records exactly like this where you're just reflecting the specific dates of when that rate started and when that rate ends, right? So my very first example was January 1st to December 31st. And I would think that placing authorities are either on that calendar year in general, or they might be on a fiscal year when they change rates. I believe I've seen both over the time period. If you have a new rate that changes because the contracted rate just changes, you'll just add a new rate history record that'll reflect that new date, but always make sure that your prior rate history records have an end date if they're now outdated. Okay, so now that I have a mid-month change, 114, 1/1 to 114, and then starting a new rate in 115, I'm going to rerun the care payments hub. So I'll pop over here. I'm going to run back 3 months again to see that reflection. And I'll just jump back over to this youth's payment, or this care blah, 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 child accounting details screen, so that we'll see that reflection come up. And that is going to transition us into how you manage a single payment, a single care payment. And so I'm waiting for that circle to stop rotating so that I know that I can refresh the page and we'll see the new reflected calculation. I guess while we're also here, you can see these amounts are being calculated. I'm not sure that I believe this calculation and where that's coming from, because I would expect them all to be pretty much the same, because I've not changed anything. So actually, I think something may be wrong with that calculation there. So I'll make a note for myself to go back and manage that. But you should be able to see a reflection of kind of every care payment record that's here. Total amount really and truly should be matching those other two, because I've not managed each individual care payment. Bill net amounts is what you are essentially invoicing that placing authority. And so this is really saying that at least what Sam knows, we've not sent any invoices to collect this $6,000. And payment net amount is mentioning what is left to be paid to the foster home provider. And I would assume it's also for if this family did any respite, the respite payments as well. That it's really both of those, because those are payments that need to leave our organization so the foster provider can care for that child. Okay, so let me refresh the screen. We should have, perhaps I already did. We have, right, because I went up half the month of January, went up to $100. And you can see that this, well, besides the fact that there's different number of days between these 2 months, we have differing amounts here. So really there's two variables here. So I'm going to look at this January rate. When you click on the meatball menu, you can access the details screen. And this is the payment details, the care payment details for January's foster home payment. This is not reflective of the administrative payment or a respite payment. It is literally just what we're paying to Ben and Jennifer Test for the care of foster care accounting test, that child, in January 2025. So because it had a mid-month rate change, Sam is actually showing us a payment breakdown of how it's calculating those specific amounts. So from January 1 to the 14th is 14 total days at a $60 rate, and the total amount is $840 for that. 8/15 to 31 is 17 days at $100 is $1,700. So we can see how Sam is calculating that amount. The next thing that you can do on the system, and agencies have different ways of managing this. So some people just use SAM as just calculating what that total amount should be and stop. They don't use it for anything else because their placement record and the rate history record is in here. And this really replaces kind of wild matrixy spreadsheets that I've seen of what foster care agencies are doing to calculate these rates. Okay, that's what that part does. But SAM can be used even further to say what amounts you've actually paid to the family, right? The paid to the family amount versus what amount you've received from the placing authority. And I think this is an older version. That bill 2 should be filled in with the placing authority record, which we already know, but I think this version of SAM is outdated, frankly. Okay, so other things that you could do. One, we could click payment sent date. If we click payment sent date here, I'm going to say yes, that today we received this payment. And SAM is making an assumption when I do that, that we've been paid, or rather we have paid the foster provider this entire amount, the full $25.40. We paid them all of that. So there is now no longer any payment due. Okay. What that is creating is a record that says the payments are sent. Now, if we had a retroactive payment and it really was $100 the whole time of January versus being that placement change, or that, excuse me, that rate change in the middle of the month, and we reran Care Payments Hub, SAM would leave this information as known because it still believes that we've told it that we've made that payment, but it would give us whatever the difference is between the $2,500 and whatever an additional 14 days times $40 is, an extra $500 or $600 as our net amount, right? So it can only do this for us in giving us a net amount if we input this information. Okay, SAM just won't, it will just overwrite whatever calculation it was and not give you a net. It won't be able to calculate net amount unless you tell it that you've paid the foster parent or you've received payment from the placement authority. And there are two different things for SAM. So I want to show a different way of receiving payments or sending payments. And here, let's say that, yeah, the total bill was $25.40 that we invoiced to that placing authority, but maybe they only paid $2,200. I can actually add a bills received from the placing authority and put in $2,200, and that is going to give us a net amount of, sorry, I can't do math on the fly, but whatever that $200 difference is, something like that. So once this, I didn't open this screen, so it'll take a second for it to open. But I can say they paid $2,200 and we received that today. And you could customize the forms to add check number, additional information that may help you in auditing between SAM and your primary accounting system, or SAM and any placing authority systems that you may interact with. So yeah, my math was way off. But now I've added this record here, and we can see we still have a net amount that we need to bill the county for. And I'm not 100% what happens in those situations. If because I think the reason a county may not pay or a placing authority may not pay is because they don't believe the calculations are right. Or yeah, it's just various systems are kind of all competing in the information is my assumption. And you guys are going to know that way better than I do. But you can have a bill net amount or payment net amount that varies from the amount that we expected that we've set up for Sam to calculate for us. Okay. I love when they're conversations. There's a lot to still cover, relatively a high amount of things that I still need to cover. So I'm going to keep moving. What am I going to do? Let's talk about additional payments, and then I'll go deal with respite payments. Because I think I need to just create a new record for respite to have it a little cleaner because I didn't clean this record up all the way. So additional payments, if I'm going to add a clothing allowance or again, whatever else that your organization may pay for in addition to just a general care payment, we can click the add button for additional payments, and then we can tell it what type. This payment type is also going to be, the values that are reflected here are also connected to the care types. So I will try and show that. So I'm going to hit a clothing allowance. We can choose a payment date. And we'll say that we gave them $150. Payment date is that really, I would probably change this, but it is to a different verbiage, I think, to be a little clearer. This is the day that we're saying, yes, we're going to give this to, it's approved to be given to the foster parent for the care of the child, not really the day that we sent the payment. Those are two different days. So this is the day that it applies, and we'll press save. It's going to reflect exactly the same as everything else, all these other care payments do, except for there's no real calculation happening in SAM, except for it's going to total these different additional payments up in time. That's all that it's really doing here. Okay, let's talk about respite. I'm going to create a new child record because I just want it to be nice and clean. This is a respite test. Put them into the foster care program and press save. And I am going to set this child with a placement record. So this is really what should be happening for foster care placements today. I'll put them with the same family. Ben and Jennifer will set their placement start date, really going to match the same data that we put in the other record, and press save. And I'm going back so far because I need a little bit of space to put in respite when that might actually happen. Okay, let me just check this chat real quick. Okay. So under a placement record, you can access the details screen. Okay. Under a specific placement, you can manage the individual transitions for a child. Most often we see, and that's done under child location timeline. Most often this is respite is really what's tracked here, but you can have that the child was, ran away, or they went into a hospitalization, or whatever various things, right? There's millions of different things where a child may not sleep overnight at Ben and Jennifer Test's home. And so it allows you to track that. I don't know that every agency does every individual transition for a child, but very frequently we're adding respite here. So we'll add a record here. We're going to say they were in a different family's home. So I'm going to just stick them into this family's home. And then I'm going to tell the system, when did they arrive for that respite? When did they leave? So I'll put this as 02/01/25. And let's say 02/04/25. Our status field allows us to say more specifically, but often respite is the choice here. That's really what we're collecting. This status field also connects to a care type, so it can be really direct of how that payment is associated here. And then we can decide who is paid for this respite. This is really a policy of your agency. Do you pay the foster family, the foster home provider, and then that foster home provider pays the respite provider? Or does your agency pay the respite provider directly? You do not have to enter. Respite approved date is just something that comes afterward. Is if you want something like that. And then the respite daily payment amount override is if we're overriding the rate that we've put in that this child's rate history record. So maybe because this is an emergency respite placement, we are paying $120 versus $100 a night, something like that. That's why you would use that field. I'm going to press save. And I want to just make sure that you guys can see here, this child location timeline has more information than we actually just input. So the very first record here is entered when we entered the placement. It went ahead and added that child location timeline in it. The second record is what I just added, which is the respite for those 3 days. And then Sam assumes, it's making an assumption that the child actually went back into the foster home placement rather than went somewhere else. Okay, so it's assuming it's back in the placement so it can continue to track care payments accurately. So now on this child, I'm going to go and add a rate history record. I-101/25. We will put this as basic. This is our $50 rates, and we'll press save. Oh, okay. Still isn't going to get me what I want. There we go. Press save. Now I have a placement, a rate history, and I have a respite record. So I'm going to run Care Payments Hub. And then we'll look at what does that respite rate look like. I want this to go just a tiniest bit faster because I want to talk about other things for this also, because you have different views, and certainly I'd like to show a little bit about reports. So I'm going to refresh the screen. We've got our January amounts. We've got our February amount for the foster home payment. But you can see it's 25 days instead of 28 days in January, or in February 2025. And we do see, because we're on the child's record, we see a respite payment for February going to the respite provider's home for $50 a day times 3 days. So that's how respite is then separated out. You have to use that child location timeline under the placement in order to record that. Okay. All right. Other things that Sam can do. So all of like this accounting detail rolls up under, hopeful that this master site is updated. There's some things that it's not. I'm not going to be able to show you in here under the organization because that bill too is not being captured in here. That's already been resolved, but this particular site is not the latest update. So under a foster home, though, we have accounting details here. And this is going to show us account payable records. And under an account payable record, if I look at the details, it's going to tell us how this is calculated. So it's really what it's going to pull in are the care payments for foster home for the different children that were in this family's care at that time. So for February, there were 2 children in care at that family's home, and here are the different dates that are reflective. Other things that you can do, I didn't test any of this or look at this, but my assumption is all of this is the same, where when we go into the details page, we're getting a breakdown. Oh, this again is on that specific child, because I went to that very specific child's care payment. I do believe if I enter payment sent date as today, oh, I didn't enter anything. That's funny. There we go. That this is reflected, it really should be reflected in that child's record. So I'm just going to go and verify that. That was February. We don't have any more to pay. Okay, so from either side you were to enter data on, that care payment record is just, it's literally the same. So if I did a mid-month change, a retroactive payment change, it's going to be shown or reflected on both the foster family side and the child side. And it'll really show on the organization side as well. All right. Okay, so I've got about 10 minutes. So I'm going to jump back over to the foster family record. And you can pull this information onto templates. So I want to show you, I believe everybody here has this template. This has been around for years and years. The foster family monthly statement. There is an annual statement as well. But this is a monthly statement. So this is pulling 3 different reports on here. And then it does some totaling, and we've got some additional information that we want to show about that family specifically and our organization and what month this is and things like that. But this is a report, this is a report, and this is also a report based on care payment records that end up rolling up to this family. Now, this family has, even though it says February, we're showing, let me actually, I don't know if y'all can see it or not. I was having trouble reading it. We're showing here January respite, sorry, this is the child, right? The child's name and the amounts for January and February where this child was in their home, if we still have to pay on that. So the reason the other child is not shown here is I believe we just paid it off. I literally just clicked for, and you can actually see I've done it for, no, this is January. So for that foster care accounting test child, both January and February are paid for. So it's not something that we're going to pay the family at this time. So this is, again, this report is showing only amounts that the family is still owed for their care of whatever children. So if there were 3 kids in care, we would have multiple different rows for each child that would show the specific interval. When did it start? As the placement ended? In this case, it's not, the kid's still in care, and the total number of days for that month that the kid was there. I think there are some things that you could do to the report. The template, you can absolutely modify the report that's connected to reflect information that is more important to you or your families too. So that I just want to touch base on. This is not a template discussion at all, because that can be a loaded conversation. And there's lots to learn about the template designer in general. But if I edit template from the sidebar there, I can see this. This is the report that is pulled in. Sam, right here is just letting you know it is a template report. And then this is the report name. So I like to copy it, go over to settings, hit reports, and then find that report name by just using the browser's find function. And I could manage the columns on this, right? This is also not a report builder column, but I can manage the columns. If you didn't want to show things of the payment net amount, but you wanted to only show just February, all of that could be done by changing the filters on the report. I just got through all the things on my list that I have. Oh, but I didn't have on my list reports in general to manage foster care accounting. So on the care payments hub, I like having a single spot for this, but these reports are also accessible to you under settings reports. You'd be able to find them there. Report menus are just really nice to group reports that have a common purpose together, or certainly you have your unique user report menu on your homepage that you can track information there as well. So where is the one? Now, this is a good report. Let me open them in a new window, and I think I'm going to get rid of all that. So I'll look at a couple reports here. This report has no data on it right now, but I really just want to show you the configuration of it. This is required. This is a child-based report where a child has a placement records. Okay. But we've also pulled on rate history because we really want to see where the rate history has a start date, but has no daily rates. Because I went through and manually added that data all at one time, it's all nice and clean. You could absolutely require those fields to be entered if you have a rate history, and then this is going to become kind of null and void. You wouldn't need to do that if you had required fields. But because they're not required, because when Sam comes out of the box to folks, we don't know if you are even going to use this function or if you do daily or monthly rate. Things are a little bit more open-ended because it's so variable. So you can modify this report to reflect more accurately to what your organization needs. Okay. But this is if you had children who have placements and their rate history records are not completely filled out, you will ultimately always want this report to be empty. But again, we're humans. Data entry is never, ever completely accurate in full. So you may have data. And so Sam can't do its calculation if you don't have rates entered. So ways to look at that. And then this was families to pay. So this is, right, we've got lots and lots of data in here. Let's look at the configuration first. That is really what tells us what this report exactly is. This is showing from the foster family side, care payments, where the account payable amount, so the roll up to all the children's care payments that might be under a particular month, has an amount due, right? It's greater than $0, or and is really how this is set up. And any care payments net amount also is greater than, so there's a payment that's due, greater than 0. So there is a payment that's due in some way. These are all of the families that fit that criteria. This data goes back tens of years at this point. So our report is kind of junky. But organizations absolutely work from reports. So clients that use SAM and use this functionality in SAM absolutely have reports like this built out where they have more columns that reflect probably payment sent date and like the total amount. So they can go in and mark off, yes, we've paid that full amount. So all of this is like every other report in the system where you can really manipulate what's displayed here. Some people like, instead of interval as an example, interval start and end dates, which I think is really just going to say the beginning of whatever month to the end. Some people like to add an additional table, that payment breakdown table, which would show, where's that kid? This would be Ben and Jennifer. There was one of the youths that we tested on or showed examples for had a placement. Where was it? Where the rate was changed mid-month. I can't remember from here. And it actually is probably, again, it's that other child record where I've paid it all. So they're actually not showing on this report, is that kid, that foster care accounting report, where it would have, if you have the payment breakdown table on here, it would also show those two payments from January 1st to January 14th, January 15th to January 31st. So you have really more accurate reflection rather than a total amount. In this particular situation, this totally works. I would assume most kids, it's going to be clean. There's just going to be some youth where they have a retroactive payment or mid-month change or a placement change mid-month that's going to, your situations where you're going to need a bit more data points. You can pull reports for these care payments from the child, from the foster family, and from the organization. So you've got lots, 3 different angles really to approach this information. Just trying to think if there's anything else that I should really share. I mean, obviously you can get back and around. This report works like all other reports. So I can get back to the foster family. They're tied together, so I can move back to the child. I want to say that. There they are. Can come back over here. And then I may leave you here on that accounting details screen. And really, once it pushes back over there, at this point, I think I want to allow you some time for questions if you've got any, because that is a lot of information that I just shared. Marianne, you've seen it twice. Is it connecting when you've seen it?
For sure. My problem is I just got to get in there and use it. So, but yeah, I mean, especially the new website is so much better.
Oh, good. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah, we appreciate that. I think we've got some folks in this call who used it a lot longer than New Mercy.
Yeah.
Looking at you, David. Do you guys find the new interface more pleasing, or you have still nostalgia for the older version?
I After the first couple of weeks, I get such little feedback from our people that they just took it in stride and just run with it, I think.
Awesome. Awesome. It was really more of a joke for you to, as I assume after 18 years or 15 years that you've been using the one site, I have a little bit of nostalgia, but as we've moved more clients forward, it's not painful to go back, but you're already get used to the new muscle memory of where things are on screen. Yeah. But the colors are cute and I miss that a little bit. So Gurmeet, I don't think you guys were using this yet.
There's a lot that needs to get fixed up on us putting it in there. One of the things that I remember from the back. I just recently came back in November, but when I was doing some of the documentations, like putting the respite care information in there, other stuff, so it needs to be updated on Sam's
Okay.
for a lot of stuff. So I'm working
Yeah.
on it. I'm working on it.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. It's a lot. I mean, there's a heavy lift for your initial data entry. And then once you guys have built in, you definitely have your placements, you definitely are understanding or entering respite correctly or entering rate history. Once you've got that base done, that works. Some of the things I believe, Marianne, when we all worked together a week or so ago with New Mercy site, we did bulk inserts in order to add rate history records for all of the kids, right?
Yeah, yeah, you showed us how to do both. Yep.
Yeah, which was nice. So, Gurmeet, there is a function when you're on a report to bulk insert or bulk update records. So instead of having to go to every single child record, when we have to add a rate history record where the rate history start date must be the placement start date. We can insert that record. We could make assumptions that the level of care is whatever, right? And it's going to vary depending on your organization setup.
Yeah, California rates are very different because it goes from intensive to all the way to basic, but it's like level of care is 1, 2, 3, 4, and then intensive, and then also basic.
Yep. And so that for you is going to look like when you're here, you will click in. We may have to change this. Actually, you know what? I don't think you guys can get to the screen anymore for rate history. So you may have to tell us, but this is really just a list. I'm pretty positive you will actually. If you
Yeah, I
want
could
to,
add it. You
I
taught
don't,
me how to do it.
yeah, I'm not sure that you can do it once
Okay.
you're in this new site anymore. There have
Okay.
been some situations where agencies really started over customizing some of these tables and forms that are necessary for this functionality to work, which costs a lot of money and a lot of time to just kind of clean up and set back to original. So we put some boundaries on some of the tables so that we can help you move forward rather than all of us spend all of this effort on fixing a misunderstanding of customization. So this particular page, I don't think you can actually access anymore. You might be able to get to it from the list, but you would add different items in here, right? To be intensive 1, 2, 3, 4, basic 1, 2, 3, 4. That's all that it would look like. It's really just a list item that you're adding. Sam, can't be set up because again, every state, every county can potentially do them differently.
Okay.
I would
Because
be
the way they say it is LOC 1, LOC 2, LOC 3, and LOC 4. That's
right.
how they do it.
Yep. Right. And it's like, that's the thing is like, I would bet Marianne, it's different for you guys, and Pam dropped off, but right. It is literally different for every state and county. So, and not necessarily county, it's only determined whether or not a county is who's paying versus the state who's paying. So, well, cool. Well, let us know. We're going to continue forth on perfecting the guide that's out there so that you can reference that. This webinar will be linked into that guide so you can easily find it. It'll also be available once it's produced in our webinars by date. And we are working on, once we're done fully with all of the SAMI release, all the clients, all the guides will simplify dramatically. We're just gonna have one version of every guide instead of having to maintain 2 versions. And so even the guides are gonna be a lot more cleaned up. That's what I have for you today, except for last thing is we'll see you again next Wednesday. I think we're talking about checklists next Wednesday. And we're at the same time, you'll get the email right before. And should you want to look at our events page before, you could go to the website, go to events, and you'll see the remaining calls that are here for March. You can add them to your calendar and join the ones that are of interest to you.
Okay.
All
Sounds
right.
good.
Sweet.
Thank you.
Pleasure to
Thank
see you
you.
guys. Thank you all for joining, and we'll talk to you later.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.
I